Welcome back to the Matt and Eric Talk Twins podcast. I'm here with my co-host Matt. That makes me Eric, and I feel like today we should start with a bit of an apology. Obviously, it's been a delay in our posting schedule. It's been a wild 2-ish weeks for me and Matt, especially me. So yeah, I moved down to Minneapolis last Sunday. Very exciting, hitting my first Twins game of the season tomorrow. And because Matt was also in Minneapolis on a work trip, we decided, hey, why not try our first in person recording? And that was going to be fine until we realized I just moved into this apartment yesterday. We have nowhere to record. So we tried recording on my balcony, which also probably would have been okay until we realized Matt also forgot his podcast recording equipment. So we ended up recording on my balcony with Matt using AirPods, and we learned that night that the outgoing planes from the MSP airport fly directly over my apartment. So, in short, I got about like half an hour into the podcast last week and realized that for the viewers' sake, we probably just are going to post this one. Did not sound very great. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about. We had a lot to talk about back then, so there's going to be even more. So after that long and windy introduction, we should probably get back to what this is, which is a Twins podcast. Tell me, Matt, how are we feeling about the Twins?
I mean, okay, it's hard to summarize in like one short little blurb like normal because like Eric talked about, it's been 2 weeks and 2 very eventful weeks. The Twins have traded for 2 relievers and a starter. They had a ton of other rumors of what they're involved in. We'll get into all of that. They've played 3 or 4 full series as well. Overall, vibes are still okay. We need this offense to start scoring some runs, but team's still in it, then they're doing interesting stuff.
Yeah, interesting would be probably the name of the game to me, since really even before the trade deadline, we came into it really dicey, dropping both the series to the Mariners and Royals. Thankfully, I think by that point, the front office's mind had largely already been made up. They go out there and they get Jeff Hoffman, Dean Kramer, and AJ Minter. Another fun little bonus for me and Matt. We are sitting here both watching the game while we record, so if we sound a little distracted, it's probably why.
Yeah, also Eric is sick, which is to be noted. So like if you hear sniffling or random coughs, we're doing what we can to get the pod out for you.
It's really been a wild 2 weeks, like I said. But currently we're watching Dean Kramer get to work against his former team, the Orioles. More importantly, through 2 innings already, the Twins have been running up not Taylor Rogers. Trevor Rogers.
There you go, you got the third
Trevor Rogers. I had like a 1-3 shot there. Got around to it. But I bring this up because it really kind of feels like the Twins' offensive performance the past few weeks. It's been a lot of traffic. It's been a lot of damage, but not a lot of runs. What do you make of that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean it's just normal regression to the mean, right? Like this Twins team has been kind of middle of the pack in like OPS and really every offensive stat, right? Like they're good, but they're like 10th, they're 12th best in baseball, but they're putting up, top 5, top 7 run scoring numbers, and that's just because they've been exceptional with runners in scoring position. And now we've seen, a dry spell, a couple weeks where they just haven't gotten those big hits and they haven't scored runs as a result. Like it's tough and it's really unfortunate to watch as we just watched Ryan Kreidler ground out to end the inning with a runner in scoring position. But I mean, it's the kind of lulls that you run into over the course of a season, and the Twins were due for something like this.
Yeah, the issue is they just didn't really have this type of lull to walk themselves into. With how poorly they started, they really, really, really had to fight just to get to this kind of 500 spot by the trade deadline. So we're certainly hoping they snap out of it soon. I'm going to loop this back to the trade deadline right away. And I'm going to give you my first trade deadline related question, Matt. The Twins did not make any additions to the offense at the trade deadline, but they were heavily linked to Zach Neto. What do you make of, I guess, both of those decisions by the Twins?
Yeah, I think the Twins' offense is really interesting, and we'll get into the moves that they actually made. But there's 2 moves on offense that we saw the Twins be linked to. Right, the first one, as Eric talked about, Zach Neto. I think he would have been a great fit for this Twins team. I mean, we spent time before the deadline talking about it. We spent probably a good 20 minutes in our canceled patio podcast talking about Neto. But he's a guy that would have been a really good fit. He's still in his mid-20s. He's a good defender at shortstop. He has 25, 30 homer power. He can run a little bit. Like, he's not a superstar because he does strike out a lot, and that limits his overall offensive game. But, like, he's a good above average starting shortstop, borderline star, under team control for 3 seasons past this point. And so I would have liked to see Neto. He would have gone a long ways towards improving the Twins offensively and defensively. But we also heard that the asking price from the Angels started with Walker Jenkins, and it sounds like they never got off of that. From what Bob Nightingale was saying leading up to the deadline, the Twins were all over Neto. They were trying to make a deal happen, but it sounds like it would have taken Jenkins, and the Twins were unwilling to do that. And I think that's a really good stance for them to take.
I'm also on board with that. If Jenkins was the asking price, I'm really glad Jeremy Zoll walked because, like, look, we all wanted the Twins to add at this deadline, but it had to be within reason, right? I think that was the thing that I was probably the most skeptical about approaching the deadline is how do you really toe that line of being a buyer, making meaningful contributions to this team this year without really selling the future. And like Matt said, we'll get into that a little bit, but to me, as great as Zach Neto is, it's not an absolute need, right? Like, don't get me wrong, he would have been a really fun addition. He probably would have pushed us into being a legitimately top 5 offense in this league. But with arguably all 3 of our top 3 prospects being hitters that are at the AAA level, I mean, I guess Kaelen Culpepper is up at the majors, which we'll also have to get to. I just think that the Twins did right by themselves to really focus on their pitching at the deadline and just kind of trust that this team can continue to kind of just find their way into some success like they have been, and maybe supplement that with some of their younger guys who are pretty close to the major leagues. I know Emmanuel Rodriguez also returned to AAA today, so hopefully if the Twins, feel like they need him, they still have Alex Jackson on the roster. There's maybe a world where he makes it all the way to the end of the season, but to me, that's also a really easy call up right there to get a guy like Emmanuel Rodriguez or maybe Walker Jenkins in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to see both of those guys this season, barring injury. Like, especially Emmanuel Rodriguez. I mean, he is out of options at the end of the season. They're definitely going to give him a look while they still have the ability to send him down. And Walker Jenkins is crushing AAA right now. I think they probably want to keep his rookie eligibility, so they'll probably wait until the end of this week, early next, before making a move on him. But, like, I think, especially if this offense continues to struggle, with how aggressive we've seen Zoll and Tom Pohlad be, I would not at all be surprised to see those guys come up.
Yeah, I, for one, am still much more than ready to see Austin Martin off my team. He continues to have a greater and greater reduced role, and I still understand that the fit isn't seamless with him being a right-handed corner outfield bat. He's really only here to be a platoon guy. I've said it once, I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it until we see either Jenkins or Rodriguez. I don't care. Let Rodriguez, let Jenkins, let Alan Roden face a left-handed left-handed pitcher as a left-handed hitter. I would rather see that than whatever the hell we've been getting out of Austin Martin. I think the sneaky other conversation that the Twins could be having, maybe for more of a Walker Jenkins call up in a week or two. Does Alan Roden need to go back down to the minor leagues?
Yeah, and I'm going to apologize in advance because we have been jumping around topics. We're going to continue to. We have so much to talk about, and half of it Eric and I have already discussed. We're just going to jump from topic to topic. So sorry. We have a lot to get to. I think that's a really good point, right? So I was very frustrated yesterday listening to the game. The Twins, there's a lefty on the mound, right? Runners on first and second, nobody out. And Alan Roden's coming up. Instead of having Roden hit for himself against a lefty, they pinch hit Austin Martin. But then they told Austin Martin to bunt, like sack bunt, get the guys over. But Austin Martin's a terrible bunter. And so he popped up 2 bunts foul and then ended up striking out. So he struck out on 3 pitches. He didn't move up the runners. It's like, it was the worst case scenario for when you're trying to sack bunt. And I have a hard time believing that Alan Roden can do the same thing. And also, I don't care about lefty righty when it's a bunt situation. Just give me the better bunter of the two, and that has to be Alan Roden. And also, even if it's like flip a coin, we don't really know who the better bunter is, keep the guy who's already in there in the game, and then it gives you another option later. Because we saw the next inning, Austin Martin comes up, bases loaded, 2 outs, and it's right on right. And it's a horrible matchup for Martin. That would have been a good matchup for Roden. And Martin strikes out or grounds out in that at bat. And it's like, well, if you would have given yourself the option, like if you would have kept that avenue open by leaving Roden in there, you set yourself up for a better situation later on, and you're not losing anything because you're just asking a guy to bunt anyways. So this is a long-winded way of saying I think the platoon has been a little bit mismanaged, but like either way, the Twins aren't really getting production out of their like whole right field situation. And I think at some point a contending team has to pull the trigger on trying to get an upgrade up, especially when, as you said, 2 of our top 3 prospects are right fielders.
I think the key word in that whole rant to me is contenders, because as weird as it is, we have to be treating this team like contenders. That's what they declared for themselves at the deadline, and by God, that's what we're going to be for the last 2 months. To me, it was okay to be doing this for the first 3 months when we weren't that great. We didn't expect to be that great, and to me, this was just largely a season of exploration and really giving guys a lot of run to make sure we're ready to move on from them, or make sure that they are a big part of our future plans. And we're not at that point anymore, like Austin Martin, the exact situation that Matt described, right? If that happens in a 2-run loss in April, nobody really bats an eye. Like, yeah, we maybe get irked about it. We might tweet about it. Nobody really bats an eye. These are games, especially against the best team in the league with the Milwaukee Brewers, that you cannot be dropping. You cannot load the bases twice in both the 7th and 8th innings in a tie ball game and walk away with 0 runs. So while I initially liked that the Twins kept this bench very balanced to give Derek Shelton a lot of room to, explore how this roster fits together, explore guys at different positions, different points in the batting order, in different roles. Now is not the time to be exploring anymore. Now is the time to be decisive and make a decision. And that's what they have been seemingly avoiding post trade deadline with all of their bats. And sooner or later, it's going to bite them in the butt.
Yeah, and I mean, I still maintain, especially when it's Alan Roden and not, superstar prospect like Jenkins, I still think it's good to have a right-handed complement to him. I just don't think that Austin Martin is particularly skilled in that role. And I mean, he just has such a limited skill set, right? Like he is playing against left-handed pitching, and I said that and he just went yard. Like
God,
literally
that was
as
so
I was
funny to
saying that.
watch. I'm like 5 seconds ahead of Matt right now, too. So I'm sitting here listening to him bash Austin Martin. Now 2 for 2 with a double and a home run today.
Yeah, but like in general, Austin Martin hasn't been great this year. He's been a decent defender. He's not a real burner on the base pass, but like he's fine. It's like a very uninspiring right-handed corner bat. And the Twins have shown that they're not super willing to play him in center field. He's been good in a corner, but like he's really just like a late game sub or just playing against lefties. Like how much do you really care about that? Like it's the kind of role that we've been clamoring for, like a Randall Grichuk type forever. And I still think that would be a better fit for this Twins roster. I will also say, like, it's getting harder and harder to defend Alan Roden. I think I've always been a Roden truther, and I still think that he's a good hitter. Like he hasn't hit it all this season. The expected numbers are a lot better. The power is gonna come for him. But like the whole premise with Alan Roden is that he's a left-handed bat that can play center field. He can be a really good 4th outfielder. If he's forced into a starting role, he can be a strong side platoon bat. And that's a valuable player, right? He's yet to play a single inning in center field for the Twins. The Twins have chosen to play Cody Clemens, Austin Martin, Luke Keeschel, Ryan Kreidler all over him in center field. And so at the point where you're no longer trusting Roden to play center field at all, and you're playing guys like Clemens and Keeschel with very, very minimal experience in center, he no longer seems like a viable option. And even beyond that, late in games, when it's close, the Twins have been putting in Austin Martin as a straight defensive sub for Roden and Wright, even when there's like a right-handed pitcher on the mound. And so it really shows that the Twins don't trust the glove. And if you can't trust his glove, the bat isn't special enough to make up for it. And so it kind of just feels like the Twins are wasting time a little bit with their right field mix with two very, very flawed players. And it seems like they don't trust either of them.
But I think the question is, what do you do with Alan Roden at this point if you are sending him back down again? Like, he's done everything you possibly could in AAA to prove that he's deserving of being in the major leagues. Before he got promoted, we were two of the biggest Alan Roden fans, clamoring for him to come up as soon as he was off the injured list. And it just has not clicked. I honestly, sitting here thinking about it, think there's a world where they send him back down to AAA. You hope he matches again, and maybe he has some trade value in the offseason. Is that like crazy to say?
I mean, the Twins just have so many left-handed hitting outfielders. I don't think it's crazy. I don't think they're going to get much for him. And I think they've already they've made the trade, right? He's on the roster. Like, they're going to end up just playing him and seeing what happens. And I will say, like, we might be overreacting to what I think is like 100 at-bat sample, 150 at-bat sample size. Like, he is better than he's shown so far. Him not being trusted at all in center or really even in a corner is worrisome, but I think it's less so his performance and more so just how the Twins are managing it. And so I don't know. I think he's not quite in like a James Outman situation where they're just holding on for dear life and it's a lost cause. But it definitely makes the trade feel a lot worse. I'll also say, like, and I brought this up in our porch podcast, but it makes me kind of wonder whether the Twins pro scouting department has a tough time evaluating outfielders. Like, you think in recent seasons, the Twins have brought in a lot of speed and defense oriented guys in the outfield. And they've had two that have really hit in Harrison Bader and Michael A. Taylor, two guys that worked out exceptionally for the Twins. Then you think about the other options they've brought in: Manuel Margot, James Outman, Alan Roden, all guys who are touted as center fielders, guys who could be the backup to Buxton, none of which were really trusted in center field at any point, and all of which were really unproductive Twins. And so I don't know, like, maybe there's something there where the Twins do a poor job of evaluating outfield defense and they end up just bringing in some lemons.
I would also argue, though, outside of Alan Roden, who we picked up obviously in the Lewis Varland trade.
Louis.
Hey, he said he would prefer to go by Lewis in the media.
No.
Technically, no.
He said that his name on the billboard is Lewis because it makes his mom happy, but he goes by Louis still.
All right. Well, one more time for Mama Varland's sake, we got Roden in the Lewis Varland trade. I'll correct that going forward. But other than that, like, we didn't spend a ton to go get James Outman. Like, yeah, Brock Stewart was nice, but let's be real. With his medicals, you were never getting anything big for him. Manuel Margot was cheap. I don't know the exact number, but I think it was sub $5 million. Yeah, they did hit on the Harrison Bader and Michael A. Taylor signings, like you said. But are you telling me that going 50% on impactful signings for $3 million or less isn't, like, pretty decent still for a front office?
Okay, but the thing is, like, the Outman deal was an unforced error because they could have just kept Brock Stewart around. Like, yes, the medicals are scary. They still need relievers. And, like, it would have been, I think, a better bet to just keep Brock around and hope that he stayed healthy. Which I know there's some hindsight involved, but, like, even at the time, we were like, man, this seems like really selling low on a guy that has elite reliever upside. And then, like, I don't know. Overall, I get your point, right? Like, these are cheap acquisitions. You're just hoping are, role players on a good team. But most of these guys, we only care about their defense, Roden being a little bit of the exception. And, like, even just defensively, we've seen guys really struggle. And it's like, I feel like you should know if this guy is a good center fielder before you trade for him. Like, defense, especially for guys who aren't aging out, is something that doesn't really change a ton year to year.
Yeah, and in that sense, I don't know what you want to call it. Maybe just a lack of information on some of these guys. I think it is probably more just wishful thinking. I mean, James Outman did have some center field experience, but outside of that, like Alan Roden came over primarily as a corner outfielder that we simply hyped up to be a guy who could play center field. I would say the same about Manny Margot. I don't
No,
know
Manny
how much
Margot was an
center
elite center fielder back in the day.
was he really,
Yeah, he was a very good defensive center fielder when he was in Tampa.
because he was only what, like 25, 26 when we picked him up, so it couldn't have been that long of a career for him.
Yeah, I mean, he fell off hard, but he was good back in the day. And also, James Outman was an elite center fielder his first year in the league.
Yeah, I mean, James Outman was a lot of things in his first year in the league that he did not live up to the hype to. I guess why I queued this in is more because I want to talk about one of my biggest takeaways from Dan Hayes' recap on the trade deadline. Dropped that today on The Athletic, and it starts out with Jeremy Zoll saying, and Tom Pohlad really confirming, that what drove the Twins' actions at this deadline was Tom Pohlad really reassuring Jeremy Zoll that the money wasn't going to be an issue, that salary was not going to be an issue, that he could go out there and he could add money to this roster and not have to worry about getting Tom Pohlad to sign off on every single deal. And we saw that end up bringing them in what, 8.5 million in salary in the form of Jeff Hoffman, Dean Kramer, and AJ Minter. I think the biggest trade here, certainly in terms of money and prospects being moved, was Jeff Hoffman, who the Twins traded. I know Dason Hill was the big name to come out of that trade. You're gonna have to catch me up on who the other pieces were, Matt.
Yeah, it was Dason Hill, John Klein, who we saw in the big leagues earlier this year, and Demurray Pena. Pena's, I mean, organizational depth. He wasn't a highly sought after prospect by any means. Klein could maybe be a decent middle reliever, but he struggled in the brief sample this year. He's an undrafted free agent. He hasn't had a good year in AAA. Like, I'm not super worried about him. It's really just Dason Hill, who, we've talked about on this podcast before, is a left-hander, 20 years old, throws really hard, good breaking stuff, no idea where it's going. If he can ever throw strikes, he's probably at worst a mid rotation starter, at best a frontline guy, and his stuff could certainly play in a leverage bullpen role. But I mean, he's really the only guy of value that they gave up in that deal.
Yeah, and for me personally, if a pitcher can't throw strikes, I really don't care what he's throwing because, hey, I could get up there and throw some really weird stuff. It wouldn't find the strike zone, but it would move really weirdly. Not at a Dason Hill level, but the point being, I mean, we've seen this before. Shout out Marco Raya, who got, what, a 2-week stint in the majors and did nothing with it because he was averaging almost 9 walks per 9 innings. I like this trade because I think there's a world where you could argue that Jeff Hoffman was the best reliever dealt at this deadline. And for a Twins bullpen that could also have had an argument as the worst bullpen in the majors pre trade deadline, this could not have been a better fit for the Twins with a guy who also has one more year of control after this season.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I definitely think Hoffman was the best reliever. I mean, it's either Hoffman or Weaver was the best reliever dealt. And I really like that they have a second year of control on him. The Blue Jays are paying down, I think, $3.75 million of his contract next year. So the Twins have him for about $7.5 million. And so he's going to be probably their highest leverage reliever this year and next. He's making really reasonable money both seasons. And I mean, Aaron Gleeman on aarongleeman.com had a more statistical breakdown of Jeff Hoffman. Very much recommend that you go read it. But he, by a lot of advanced metrics, is like a top 5, for sure, top 10 reliever in baseball. He's gotten unlucky with the long ball and some BABIP stuff. But like, he's a very, very good arm. And so you're going to have to give up a good prospect to get him. If Dason Hill pans out, this is going to look like a terrible trade 5 years from now. But I mean, it's the price of doing business to get a high end arm, and I'm not at all upset about it.
It's your own favorite saying that I'm going to throw back at you, too. There's no such thing as a pitching prospect. That's another reason that I'm a big fan of this trade. because I think anytime you're dealing, especially with the youngest guys in the league, I mean, Dason Hill's still only 20. I think I would always rather trade a pitcher than a batter because batters are more projectable, more likely to stay healthy, generally just easier to see a path to the future for them. So I'm really not at all upset with this trade. Honestly, when you look at it as a whole, I'm not really upset with any of these trades. They brought in AJ Minter, and this is one that Jeremy Zoll really highlighted as being the one that he was able to make because the Twins were willing to take on salary. The Mets suck this year. LOL Mets. Love to see it. But because of that, they were just straight up trying to dump salary. The word from Jeremy Zoll, word on the streets, is that the Twins would have needed to give up probably a top 10 ish prospect in their system if the Mets were going to send money back for us to get AJ Minter. By picking up his $3.5 million owed for the rest of the season, the Twins gave up. You're gonna have to fill this in here. I also don't remember.
Yeah, they gave up Bruin Agbayani, he was their 6th round pick a couple years ago. He's barely played in the minors, high school kid out of Hawaii. I mean, there's some intrigue here just because he's a young player that some scout liked and they took in the middle rounds a couple years ago, but like not a prospect of note. And then Billy Amick, who was their 2nd round pick out of Tennessee a couple years ago. Big raw power, big strikeout numbers, probably a first baseman, doesn't walk a whole lot. He's kind of a quad A corner power bat, kind of think like Aaron Sabato level. All in all, like two pretty much non prospects to get a solid low end setup man for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, he comes into this bullpen and he's immediately probably the fourth best arm in this bullpen, I would say. I think, however you want to shake it out, it's some mixture of Hoffman, Andrew Morris, Yoendrys Gomez, and AJ Minter being a clear top four in this bullpen. We'll get to the Dean Kramer trade as well in a second. I want to take a moment to talk about here. I thought it was interesting that with AJ Minter coming in, the Twins obviously did not want to hold three left-handed relievers in this bullpen, but the corresponding move was not Cody Funderburk, which I think a lot of us would have called. It was Kendry Rojas who got sent down. And at first, I was really not a fan of that. I think I even texted Matt as much as soon as I saw it. But then I looked at the Cody Funderburk numbers, and outside of some injury plagued 9 innings across April and May, Cody Funderburk's kind of been elite this year. He has, I think, something close to a 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, holding a sub 2 ERA. Elite is definitely a very friendly way to put Cody Funderburk's performance, but I really don't hate this decision by the Twins as much as I thought I would after I looked into it a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, Funderburk's been pretty good for the last few months. I still am not a Cody Funderburk believer. He still walks a few too many guys. He's improved in that category recently, but like I have been burnt by Funderburk too many times. But again, like it's a pretty soft back end of that bullpen. And so I don't really care who they're sending down. It'll be interesting to see if they keep Rojas stretched out. You know, we're already seeing with Joe Ryan on the IL, which is yet another thing for us to talk about in this podcast. Dear God, we have a lot to get to. But with Joe Ryan going down with his glute and back strains, we already have Zebby back up into the majors, which he also got sent down with the Dean Kramer trade. He was in the majors last time we recorded a podcast, but he's back. It's interesting, like if they want to keep Rojas stretched out and be their 6th starter for now, in case they have another injury, or if they start to shorten him up. I'm assuming that they're going to keep him stretched out to be kind of a pseudo starter. But I think as this team gets into late August, early September, especially if Joe Ryan is back and healthy, it's going to get really interesting to see if they start to shorten up guys like Zebby or Kendry Rojas and move them sort of into a bullpen role. Because you know that when we get to October, those guys aren't going to be playoff starters for the Twins. And having another guy that can throw an inning or two, touch 100, and just be filthy out of the pen, like 2023 Chris Paddock, would be a big help for this bullpen.
And to me, it's a no-brainer to keep them stretched out, especially Zebby, but also Kendry Rojas, because It's really easy to take a guy who's been stretched out and shorten him up into relief appearances. Takes a lot more time to take a guy who's been throwing 1 or 2 innings at a time, pitching like a true reliever and stretching him back out to be a starter. I think you hit it right on the money. I think the big turning point for the season is going to be when or if Joe Ryan returns from the injured list. By that point, I would honestly probably expect it to be nearing September. The Twins would have only one more month left to cover in the regular season. And then come postseason, I think that your rotation is already set. It's hopefully, if he's healthy, Joe Ryan, Taj Bradley, number two, Dean Kramer's been kind of nice. I think there's a world he makes this a conversation in the last month, but at worst, it's Bailey over three, Dean Kramer four, and no team is ever rocking with more than a four-man rotation in the playoffs.
Yeah, agreed. I guess we've talked about Dean Kramer enough. We should probably get into his trade because I think that was a really interesting one. So the Twins gave up an 18-year-old player in either low A or still in the complex, Hamnardo Reyes, who is a pretty solid prospect. Like depending on how you value low minors prospects and how you project guys, he's somewhere between prospect like 10 and 20 for the Twins. The real bullish prospect sites on him are like Fangraphs, who had him as the Twins' number 10 prospect, and Keith Law of The Athletic, who had him at, was it Keith Law? No, it was Baseball America that had him at number 12. And the people that like Hamnardo Reyes see big raw power from a young guy that should have some room to build out his frame. He could be a real impactful offensive player. Maybe he can still play some decent corner outfield defense. And so like he's a guy with real upside, but he's like 5 years away from a potential call up. Like he is nowhere close. And so it's one of those deals that either is going to look like you gave up nothing for a year and a half of a decent fourth starter, or in a few years you're going to go, man, we gave up a top 50 prospect, a good young player for Dean Kramer. This is a real loss for us.
I have two thoughts that I really just got to get off my head. First of all, it never remains weird seeing Pete Alonso in an Orioles uniform. As I say that, he just made a really weird error that I think he's actually going to get away with, where the ball was dribbling foul. He tried to push it fair. I don't know. I think that just sums up how weird.
Why did they rule that foul? That was 100% a fair ball.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that, but I will. Well, so what? He's got 1 foot in fair territory, 1 foot in foul.
And the feet doesn't matter. It's where the ball is.
Yeah, the ball is still on the line when he hits that. That's 1,000,000%. Damn. That is a really unfortunate play that the Twins cannot challenge because it should be first and second and like you can see it too. That's what gets me here, right? Pete Alonso fails to scoop this ball and you can immediately see the frustration on his face. He knows that should have been a hit.
This remains one of the dumbest rules in baseball, and I get that this is horrible radio for everyone who is not watching the game right now, but it remains one of the dumbest rules in baseball, how you can't challenge anything that happens in front of the base umpires. Like, you should absolutely be able to review fair or foul there, because that was so clearly a fair ball.
I think all of this was brought on just because Pete Alonso is an Oriole. Like I said, it's not right. I don't like seeing it, and hopefully the baseball gods will punish him for it here. I also did want to mention that between losing Jamnardo Reyes and Bruin Agbayani, the Twins really, really took a hit in terms of names in their farm system. Not something that most people are going to care about, nor should they. But as a really big names guy, I'm going to miss both of them.
Also, it worked out because Brooks Lee double instead of a weird infield single. So, ball doesn't lie.
This is going to be a fascinating podcast to watch. To all 10 of our viewers, I really hope you stick through this. I promise it's going to be probably, I would say, one of our better pods just because of how much we have to talk about. So let's get back on track with it. Dean Kramer, right?
Dude, if you have ADHD, you're going to love this pod. And if you don't mind the sounds of bodily fluids and Eric hacking on the other end,
I should be able to edit most of that out. Apologies in advance if I don't. So Dean Kramer, really weirdly fits a very similar mold as Jeff Hoffman in the sense that he's had what would appear to be a down year on the stat sheet. The raw numbers don't look great, but he's been really good in the past. Maybe not as recently as Jeff Hoffman, but Dean Kramer has had some like borderline all-star seasons. Might even be an all-star.
I mean,
He
he's like a low 4 ERA guy. He's had some good first halves though.
he has a second year of control. Well, not a second year, another year of control after this season, which makes him a very valuable asset for this Twins team to pick up. And he has a lot of underlying metrics that would suggest that the performance this season is a bit fluky. And if you believe in regression to the mean this late in the season, you've got plenty of reason to believe that Dean Kramer could, like I said, maybe be on Bailey Ober's level. There's maybe a world where if we're in the playoff race come September, we're on this podcast arguing about whether you'd rather see Dean Kramer or Bailey Ober in a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, agreed. Kramer, so just for context, from 2022 to 2025, he's put up ERAs of 3.23, 4.12, 4.10, 4.19. And that's with XFIPs that are a little bit worse, but like still pretty solid 4.43, 4.34, 4.34, 4.24. And so he's looked like, every bit of a solid, reliable fourth starter for a decent team. And then this year, his ERA is a lot higher. When the Twins acquired him, it was like 6.5. But his strikeout rate has ticked up to the point where he's an above average strikeout arm. Again, pretty small sample size, but his swing and miss rate's way up. And his xFIP is actually the best of his career, all the way down at a 3.98. And so I definitely can see where the Twins see value here. He's at worst a reliable back end starter, which we talked about the Twins needing, but also like there's some real kind of third starter upside. I don't think it's true mid rotation, but like solid back end playoff starter. Like the comp that comes to mind for me with Dean Kramer is he could be kind of like a Jake Odorizzi type, maybe a half step below that, but just kind of a solid third starter that you're okay with starting in a playoff game, but you also don't love. That's kind of where I'm at with Kramer. And you could make the argument that like the second year of control isn't super valuable because he'll probably be making $7.5 million next year. And if you don't think he's much more than a fourth starter, that's maybe not a great value proposition. But I think it's a fine move, and especially for a Twins team that desperately needed some rotation options, it's a pretty solid in season acquisition.
I'm absolutely on board with that too. I do want to take a moment to get to, I would say, the two notable moves that were not made by the Twins. But before we do that, putting a bow on the trade deadline acquisitions, I think Jeremy Zoll really went out there and nailed this. If you would have asked us just for this season, right? If we're dreaming anything's on the table, what do the Twins need to get on track as a contender? It would have been multiple bullpen pieces, probably a starter, and maybe another bat. The bat didn't come. I don't hate Jeremy Zoll simply believing in the roster that we have and the offense we have and the reinforcements that are on the way, as we've already seen with Kaelen Culpepper coming up. And I think we walked away with, again, probably the best left-handed reliever that got dealt at the deadline, arguably the best reliever overall that got dealt at the deadline. And as Matt just laid out, a guy that immediately jumps in and is at the very minimum the fourth best pitcher in this rotation. I don't think you could have asked for any more out of Jeremy Zoll at the deadline.
Yeah, agreed. And we're going to get now into like more of the speculation side. We already talked about Zach Neto, and there's a whole lot more where that came from. But going into the deadline, I think like a week before, I wrote an article over at Twins Daily, if you want to go check it out, where I laid out 4 different paths for the Twins deadline. And path number 3 for me was conservative buyers. And the exact path that I laid out, oh my God, Austin Martin. Okay, that's just a fly out. I thought he was going to hit 2 homers in my face like that. Flew out to the track. I'm saved. Okay, so the third path that I laid out, conservative buyers. And what I said was the Twins need to add a guy that can fit into their late inning trio alongside Morris and Gomez. And they need to add some sort of rental middle reliever type, and then maybe like a back end starter. Well, the Twins shot above my expectations with the back end guy, bringing in Jeff Hoffman. He's a guy that we've talked about on this podcast before as a potential target, but it was kind of our upside case. And I think they nailed it with that acquisition. AJ Minter, one of the rental options I listed in that article, I think he's fine as their top lefty, and the price was right there. And then we just talked about Kramer being a solid acquisition to fill out the rotation. That's everything that we could have asked for from the conservative buyer side. The fourth option I laid out was heavy buyers, and that was pretty much doing everything I talked about already, but also adding a controllable, impactful guy for the future. And the options that I listed, I said Zach Neto was a possibility, but I thought more likely it was going to come in the rotation. And I said Reed Detmers, Jose Soriano, or Sandy Alcantara. Sounds like Alcantara was never going to get traded, and that leaves the two Angels. And we heard today from some reporting from Dan Hayes that the Twins made a really strong offer for Jose Soriano even after he got traded to the Blue Jays. And that offer revolved around Kaelen Culpepper, which to me signifies that the Twins were really trying to add a big ticket acquisition. And I think that that's super exciting. Like they tried to really make this a slam dunk deadline.
The interesting part of that to me, though, is the Twins being in on Zach Neto and then so quickly calling up Culpepper after the deadline would imply that they knew that their shortstop position as a whole was something that they also really wanted to focus on upgrading. And that to me is where the Jose Soriano whispers get really weird to me. Because, like, what do the Twins do if they end up trading Culpepper? And I think what was it? The final package that Jeremy Zoll turned down ended up being Culpepper and Riley Quick, which is also a package I would have turned down for Jose
Yeah.
Soriano.
I don't know if I would deal Culpepper in a Soriano deal. Like I think that you need to include a prospect at that level, but I don't know that I would have. And definitely not Culpepper plus another borderline top 100 guy with some steam.
So it's really interesting to me because, on the one hand, the Twins clearly prioritized and valued upgrading at shortstop. But then on the other hand, it sounds like they were very much ready to run out the year with a Ryan Kreidler and Tristan Gray platoon at shortstop. I think to me that would have been the much more frustrating option. I think that Ryan Kreidler and Tristan Gray collectively, like that's worse to me than the Austin Martin Allen Roden platoon right now, right? I would rather see what we have right now, which is Kaelen Culpepper almost every day at short with Roden and Austin Martin still out in right field, than adding Jose Soriano at the cost of Culpepper. But that might just be me. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I also just don't love the value proposition of swapping 6.5 years of Kaelen Culpepper for 2.5 years of Jose Soriano. So, like, I think that they were right to pass on that deal. I do think there probably would have been a situation where the Twins rearrange things a little bit differently. It's like if you don't have Culpepper, and you still are keeping Trevor Larnach and Josh Bell in the organization, and you want to bring up like a Walker Jenkins to be your midseason shot in the arm on the offense, they could have really shifted things back around and moved Lee back to short, Lewis back to third, play Bell at first, move Larnach to DH, and then play Jenkins in the outfield. It would have been a ton of moving parts, and it would have made their defense a lot worse. But I think that was probably on the table in that circumstance. However, Jose Soriano, one of the premier ground ball pitchers in baseball, having him pitch in front of an infield of Josh Bell, Cody Clemens, Brooks Lee, and Royce Lewis sounds like a nightmare.
I almost just threw up a bit, and I'm not sure if it's because I'm sick or what Matt just laid out for us as a doomsday plan. If that was really what the Twins had up their sleeves, I am really, really glad this Jose Soriano trade didn't go through. Because look, the first 2/3, half, whatever we've gotten through the season has been very up and down, but definitely more up than down. And I think the big thing is there's been a lot of growth. And it would have been really frustrating to see the Twins not only give up the big prospect package, but also undo all of that growth just for a guy of Jose Soriano's caliber. Frankly, I just don't think that he's worth all of that.
I would have been more okay with it if it was Reed Detmers. I just am a bigger Detmers believer. And I was saying that like I think that the Twins should go after a controllable, impactful player at the deadline. I agree though. I don't know that Soriano checks that box, and the price would have been pretty steep to get him.
And you can
There's also a world where the Twins see their hole at shortstop and get really, really aggressive with Merrick Houston, who is hitting really well at Double A. I think that also would have been short sighted, but like there was a chance the Twins were willing to get aggressive there.
I think you can argue more about Detmers because I would agree that he's probably a better pitcher overall than Soriano. At the end of the day, I think both of them are the third best starting pitcher in our rotation right now if we make that deal. I would take
I think
Taj Bradley over both of them, so I don't like the idea of going through all that trouble to. I mean, granted, that would be a phenomenal starting pitcher 3 for a playoff team, but at the end of the day, still just our third best starting pitcher.
Yeah, it would have gotten really exciting when you think about adding Pablo Lopez back to that group next year. But yeah, I mean, it definitely, I don't know. It's more so that I'm just not super sold on Soriano. I would be more convinced if Soriano was going to be pitching in front of a good defense. Like the other team that was in on Soriano was the Cubs, who have probably the best infield defense in the league. And I love Soriano in that context. The Twins have an abysmal infield. And so I think his value is significantly diminished for the Twins. And I think most pitchers, it's pretty neutral, their value pitching in front of any defense. Soriano, very specifically, like should not be pitching in front of a bad infield, and that is what would have happened with the Twins, especially if they then don't have Culpepper to supplement this group.
Absolutely. That to me feels like probably enough bashing on a guy that we were just talking about wanting the Twins to go out and get. So the other non-deal that the Twins made, well, didn't make, that got a lot of chatter and Dan Hayes followed up on again post deadline, is that Ryan Jeffers is still a Twin. The word on the street once again is that even as the Twins started adding pieces, even though they'd already added Tommy Nance at the start of the month, they added AJ Minter. They waited, I believe, until deadline day to add Dean Kramer and Jeff Hoffman. To the very end, teams were calling the Twins about a potential Ryan Jeffers trade. And I personally, as a fan, I went through a very large roller coaster of emotions about this because, on the one hand, we saw the Miami catcher. I'm drawing a blank on his
Liam
name.
Hicks.
Hmm?
Liam Hicks.
Yes, sir. Liam Hicks, who got dealt. I also don't remember where for a very underwhelming return.
Tampa Bay.
Yep. And that, for one, knocked out one of the big buyers for Ryan Jeffers because I think that everybody would have said the two teams in the biggest need of catching help were the Rays and Yankees, who are also arguably the two best teams in the American League. I really would have thrown up if we saw Ryan Jeffers in a Yankees uniform. But then after the Liam Hicks trade came in at what I would say is well under market value, we saw the Red Sox come in and just absolutely blow the Orioles away to go pick up Adley Rutschman. And I think that had to have been why teams were so bold in going back to the Twins and trying to re-engage in Ryan Jeffers trade talks, and B, why I am still to this day a little bit surprised that Ryan Jeffers is a Minnesota Twin. I mean, what do you think he would have got in terms of a trade deal? Because I have to imagine it falls somewhere between Liam Hicks and Adley Rutschman.
Yeah, it definitely would have been significantly below Rutschman because Rutschman's controlled for an additional year. And he got an absurd price. Like I think the Red Sox really overpaid for Rutschman. But yeah, I definitely think the Twins probably could have gotten a top 100-ish level prospect. I think the Yankees in particular probably would have been willing to trade one of their starting pitching prospects or one of their controllable starters. I think the Twins maybe would have had to add on, especially if we're talking about a guy like Will Warren, who's currently in the rotation and pitching well for them and under control for 3 more years. But I mean, I could have seen the Twins going after a deal like that. But at the end of the day, like it'd be really hard to say that you're a contending team and then trade away probably your best or second best player this year, second best position player this year at a really premium position where you can't really backfill him. and who is a leader on this club. Like, it would have been really hard to sell that to fans. And I think effectively the Twins are going to either get that second year of control with Jeffers or, add a solid prospect anyways, because I think that they're going to offer him a qualifying offer at the end of the year. We've talked about them being kind of on the fence about that, but to me, if you're holding him through the deadline, that's signaling that you're probably more willing to make that investment. And immediately following the deadline, we saw Tom Pohlad give interviews for the Twins radio broadcast, and he was asked, you were willing to take on salary. What does this mean for the organization? He said, yeah, I hope this is, just a small part of showing fans that we, want to, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's a small part of showing fans that we're serious about contending. We're willing to invest in this team. We know we have a long way to go, and, we're going to continue investing into next year. And then he was asked, are you hoping to increase payroll? And his exact words were, I'm not hoping, I know we will. And so if he's saying on record that they're going to increase payroll, I think that to me is saying that there is going to be some space for them to at least offer the $22-23 million qualifying offer to Jeffers.
And that right there had to have been why he's ultimately a Minnesota Twin, because I think if there's any doubt in Jeremy Zoll's mind about his ability to offer a qualifying offer, I think you have to trade Ryan Jeffers, right? Because at the end of the day, Matt was right about everything he said on how a trade of Ryan Jeffers would have reflected for a young team that wants to call itself contenders this season. But Ryan Jeffers is firmly too good to have given up without any value right now. I think the other interesting piece of this is that the early vibes, the early discussions with Ryan Jeffers' camp is that barring an absolute meltdown at the end of the season, Ryan Jeffers probably would deny this qualifying offer. As much as I honestly would love to see the Twins just get another year of Ryan Jeffers at 20 something million, it does look like they're on a path to probably just letting him walk and picking up a competitive balance round A pick for Ryan Jeffers. And ultimately, I don't think that we would have gotten a prospect of much better value if we traded him at the deadline. So to me, this becomes a no-brainer with that type of financial backing that Tom Pohlad is able to give Jeremy Zoll.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the best case scenario is that Jeffers accepts a qualifying offer. As you pointed out, that's probably unlikely. But yeah, getting a first round pick back for him is totally fine in and of itself, especially if it gives the Twins a good starting catcher the rest of the way and a real chance for an impact player in October, should they make it that far. And so I totally agree with the direction there. Another trade that the Twins had lined up, didn't end up making, what's been widely reported by folks on both sides, is that the Twins had agreed to trade Trevor Larnach to the Astros for Brian Abreu, and it ended up being nixed at the 11th hour by the Astros owner, Jim Crane. I think that that's a really interesting deal because Brian Abreu has been one of the better relievers in the American League for the last 4 or 5 seasons. He's off to a pretty rocky start this year, but since the beginning of June has turned it around and looks like himself again. And I think, I don't think that the Twins would make the Hoffman deal if they already had Abreu in tow. But if they had, it's really interesting to look at this bullpen. If they had Abreu and Hoffman and then backfilled Larnach's spot with, a guy like Walker Jenkins, the offense probably takes a hit, but the defense is much improved. And man, that bullpen would have been fun.
I'm right there with you on not believing that the Hoffman deal would have gotten done if we did pick up Brian Abreu. I think the fun conversation really becomes, which trade would you have rather had? Would you rather have Brian Abreu for Trevor Larnach or Jeff Hoffman for Dason Hill and some cookies?
Oh, I would much rather have the Hoffman deal because you have Hoffman for 27 and you have Hoffman and Larnach playing together this year versus if you make the other deal, you're getting Abreu, but you're losing Larnach, who's been one of their better hitters. It's probably like value neutral for this season. So yeah, I definitely think that the Hoffman deal is a better trade for this season. It makes more sense for this current Twins team, but also that's a deal that could really blow up in your face if Dason Hill's, what they think he can be.
I do wonder if we want to tie this back to some of the earlier rumors. if this was kind of just a altogether alternate reality for the Twins, where we talked about, what do the Twins do if they wanted to upgrade at shortstop, but they traded Kaelen Culpepper for Jose Soriano. I think you start to see a world where, as you mentioned, if Kaelen Culpepper isn't coming up post trade deadline, if the Twins had in fact traded Trevor Larnach for Brian Abreu, that Walker Jenkins is probably the guy getting that call instead, and the Twins have Jose Soriano. And I think that becomes a lot more interesting of a debate. But in the grand scheme of things, I am still very much on the train of Jeff Hoffman over Brian Abreu.
Yeah. I mean, overall, like, just to put a bow on kind of the deadline stuff, like I think that the Twins did really well at the deadline, right? Like they covered their bases, they did everything that we said they needed to do to seriously compete this year. And I think in some ways, Hoffman's the best right-handed reliever available, Minter the best lefty. Like they went above our expectations in the bullpen. Kramer's fine as a fourth, fifth starter. Like they did what they needed to, and then they looked to take big swings elsewhere. And I think that's all that you can really ask for. Like you can't make a blockbuster every deadline, but the Twins did the sensible thing and then looked for that blockbuster if it was available. And I think that that's, a great deadline strategy.
And I just want to say before we move on to the rest of the news and chatter we have in Twinsland, Matt, I'm really proud of you. Not once tonight have you mistook Jeff Hoffman for Trevor Hoffman. Another funny bit from the patio pod that will probably never see the light of day. I would guess at least 6 times trying to talk about this Jeff Hoffman trade. We saw Matt refer to him as Trevor Hoffman. Some are calling it the McAbel disaster all over again, but you really cleaned that one up tonight.
Thank you. I really just stared in the mirror and said Jeff Hoffman over and over again until it sunk in.
Hell yeah, man. I'm so excited. I should have done the same thing. But moving on to, as I said, the rest of the news and chatter in Twinsland, we do got to start with the Twins' most important player and the most important news on that player. Joe Ryan back to the injured list. It's a, what was it, quad soreness? Quad strain?
Quad strain and back soreness.
It makes a lot of sense when you look at the comments that Joe Ryan has been making over the last 2, 3, 4 starts, really since after the All-Star break, where they initially, for one, held him out with what they just called dead arm, gave him an extra 4 days. I think dead arm is something that every pitcher goes through a little bit during the dog days of the season. I don't know that they really were ever worried about his arm. I think they just didn't really know what to make of his injury. And this one makes a lot more sense, right? Because when you looked at how Joe Ryan was performing, he just looked lost. He looked lost, and he told us he was lost. He told us that he knew something wasn't right. He couldn't quite figure out what was right, and he was just hoping that he was going to be able to find that sooner rather than later. And I think this is our answer here. After his last start, he told us that he simply could not repeat his delivery, that his average delivery to the batter, to the plate, was something he did not feel comfortable with. And to me, that is a massive red flag, right?
Yeah, I mean it's normal stuff, right? Like we see pitchers and like really all players play through injuries pretty regularly, and they only really go on the IL when it's clear it's a serious injury or when their performance starts to lag. And so Joe Ryan, it's not an arm injury, it's not something serious, it's just some soreness and like a minor strain. It's the kind of thing that we would expect him to like play through, especially in a competitive year. But at the point where he has 2 or 3 bad starts in a row, he's no longer helping the team. You might as well just go get healthy. I think, it makes sense the Twins kept running him out there to see if he could work through it. And then they pulled the trigger, pulled the plug when it became clear that he, couldn't continue to perform at a high level with these little injuries. And I think, hopefully you give him 3, 4 weeks on the shelf, get him back early September, and he'll be back to pre All Star break Joe Ryan.
The Twins certainly need him to be, because I really don't see this team being that competitive without him. And I think it's not a coincidence that the Twins' more recent scuffle again has come with Joe Ryan sitting on the injured list. I already touched on it a little bit at the start of the pod, how the Twins dropped both series to the Mariners and the Royals. entering the break, or not the break, entering the trade deadline. Didn't come out of it particularly hot either. Almost got swept by the Royals again post trade deadline. But at the same time, they've been in these games, right? 6 of their last 7 losses have come by 1 run. So is it fair to be hitting a panic button right now?
Although to be fair, like in those 7 games, only one of them would have been started by Joe Ryan. So like, there's only so much you can put on him. A lot of it does fall on the offense not performing. But yeah, I mean, having a guy like Ryan that can pretty consistently go out there and give you 6 or 7 innings of 2-run ball is the kind of guy that can really be a stopper for a team, right? Like when you're in a skid, he goes out there, he dominates. Even if you just scrape a couple of runs together, it's enough to get a win and get people feeling good again in the clubhouse. And so, yeah, it would have been nice to have Joe Ryan, but I mean, it's not all on him.
It's not. And I want to take this to more of a career view for Joe Ryan now because I'm starting to get a little tired. I know me and Matt really kind of got into this when Joe Ryan went on the injured list. At what point do we need to start having the conversation about a guy who is a borderline Cy Young candidate for the first half of the season and is carrying a near 5 ERA in the second half of the season? This, unfortunately, is not new to him. Matt mentioned people trying to pitch through injuries, play through injuries. Joe Ryan, I want to say it was 23, might have been 24, where he had what I believe was a back issue, tried pitching through it for pretty much the entire second half, ended up getting shut down in September when the games didn't mean nothing anymore to the Twins. And only at that point did he reveal to the Twins and the public that he was pitching through discomfort and injury that probably should have put him on the injured list much earlier in the season. So I guess at the very least, I'm glad that they're getting this out of the way now. Yeah.
Well, I think you're conflating 2 injuries. So in 23, he pitched through an oblique strain that he didn't disclose to the Twins and only told the Twins after he gave up like 4 or 5 home. Actually, it might have been his other 6-homer game to the Braves. And then he went on the IL. He came back down the stretch that year. So like he returned eventually and was fine. But he gave up a ton of runs in a short amount of time with that oblique strain. And then 2024, he had the back injury and that's where he got hurt right after the deadline. The Twins didn't bring in a starting pitcher, and then Joe Ryan was pretty much out for the year at that point. And so I think part of it too, like he's not healthy in a lot of these second halves, and so a couple of real clunkers combined with a lot of missing innings from the injuries probably turns into like some rough ERAs. But yeah, I mean it's a theme. He's struggled in second halves and that's going to continue this year. There's just not a lot of action you can take, right? Like he's one of your better pitchers. He's one of the better pitchers in baseball in the first half. He struggles in the second half. It's just kind of something you have to live with, right? Because it's not like you're going to shut him down at the All-Star break every year.
I mean, I'm not saying they should, but would it be crazy to suggest that if he's showing signs of being unable to sustain a full season's workload, that you do just always turn his All-Star break into like a 2-week break? If we know this is going to happen, I mean, it's been now, what, 3 of the past 4 seasons? At what point do you have to start treating him almost the same way that we're expecting them to treat Prelip down the stretch, where you're going to push his starts out, spread them out a little bit, try and limit his innings, because at some point it's just not clicking and you can't keep doing the same thing to him.
Yeah, and I think that that's fair. But like yeah, it's just a tough situation. Like maybe he does need his workload managed a little bit more than a normal pitcher, and like I think that's totally fair. But like you still have to have him in the rotation down the stretch, and also like it becomes really hard when guys don't have options to give guys long breaks because you need that guy's like consent. Like you need to have a real injury because you can't just put guys on phantom IL when they don't want to go on the IL. Like, there has to be an actual injury that player is okay with going on the IL for. And so like even if you're just wanting to give Joe Ryan a couple week break in the middle of the season, if you want to do that next year, Joe Ryan's a free agent at the end of the year. He's not going to let you put him on the injured list in the middle of a year. He thinks he can still go out and compete and be effective. And so, like, if he doesn't have an actual injury, you can't just put him on the IL and give him a break.
And I mean, let's be real. This is Joe Ryan we're talking about. We just detailed him trying to work through multiple injuries. There's just no world, even if we gave him a fat contract extension this offseason, that I think he'd be willing to accept a phantom IL stint. So I guess if you've exhausted all options, all you do is just sit here and hope and pray that something changes, because certainly this team to me just immediately loses contender status without a healthy Joe Ryan.
Yeah, I think it is interesting to look ahead to next year. Like, obviously, Ryan Jeffers is the big free agent the Twins are losing. They're also going to lose Josh Bell, but that's not super impactful. And then AJ Minter leaves at the end of the year, but you haven't had him for most of the season anyways. And you can pretty easily replace him with another, you know, left-handed reliever that you sign in free agency. But like, if you look ahead to next year, if they are serious about adding some payroll, you can probably expect to add one or two decent, like, real players to this roster. Maybe you bring in a good starting pitcher. Maybe, you bring in a Framber Valdez level guy like the Twins talked about. And then you're also adding Pablo Lopez back to the mix. Like, it could get really exciting for this Twins team next year, especially if they keep Joe Ryan around, they keep Pablo around. Maybe they swing a big trade. Maybe they sign a big free agent. Like, things start to look really exciting.
I'm going to ask you now, first time I'm asking you this, I guarantee you not the last. We're probably going to be beating this like a dead horse by the dog days of the winter, especially with the impending lockout. But give me your best guess based off where the Twins are now, what Tom Pollard has said. What's our opening day payroll for 2027?
So I don't think they're going to get back up into the mid 150s like they were in 2023, but I could see them being at like their 2024 payroll, like mid 130s. That would be adding like $30 million onto this year's payroll. I think that's doable. And if you think about like adding $30 million to this team, that's a solid starting pitcher. Like, that's a high end starting pitcher. That's, mid rotation guy and a bat. That's a whole lot of different things that you could try to add. And so that's a number two starter, or like a reclamation project with some real upside, plus a late inning reliever. Like, there's all kinds of combos here. And so even if they aren't getting all the way back up to their peak spending levels, just adding 20 or 30 million makes this team so much more exciting, especially if they're willing to cash in on some of these prospect chips and get, some impact talent, which it sounds like they are.
I would argue if the Twins do, let's say, bump it by 30 million this offseason, the focus has to be a starting pitcher, right? Like, this offense has already been good this year with reinforcements on the way. I just don't think that relievers are really worth spending on. And I think that's a belief that the Twins have also exemplified, not only in the Derek Falvey era, but really for many years before that. I don't know the last time the Twins have even paid a reliever like 10 million a year. And it does.
Well,
It just makes so much sense that if you go out there and you add another front-ish line starter to this rotation, as Matt mentioned, you're already talking about it being one of the best in the league to me.
the only multi-year contract they've given to a reliever since Derek Falvey took over in 2017 is 2 years, 16 million for Addison Reed.
Oh, what a deal, Derek Falvey.
Yeah, so I mean, I agree. Like, paying relievers is not something that mid-market or small market teams do or have success doing most of the time. But I'm just saying that, like, that's an option, especially on a 1-year deal. I mean, if they were to go out and get, this year we were pounding the table for like Kenley Jansen for 1 year, 10 million. They could easily do something like that. You can argue whether that's a good use of resources, but like, it's a possibility. I'll also say, generally paying starting pitchers big money is also not great, especially on long-term deals. And so I wouldn't love seeing the Twins give, $30 million a year to a starting pitcher. I mean, I would, because the alternative is just like not spending. But like, that's probably not an optimal use of resources either, especially when you're adding Pablo Lopez back to the rotation next year, which is going to be a huge upgrade. I would say if they could add a premium bat up the middle somewhere, that would be my ideal, right? Like, if the Twins signed Jazz Chisholm and made him their everyday second baseman, like, that would be pretty cool. Or if they could find a starting shortstop, or if they could bring in a true like big time bat at first base, similar to like Pete Alonso this year. A lot of these guys like aren't necessarily available in free agency this next year. It's a pretty weak class. But like if they got creative and brought on an expensive guy at a position and just added a big bat somewhere, I think that would go a long way for this team.
Really looking at it, I think second base, first base would almost have to be your only option here. I mean, what you could go out and get a catcher short term, but I think you have to pencil in Walker Jenkins, Emmanuel Rodriguez, and Kaelen Culpepper to this team next season. You're also penciling in Byron Buxton. And like, this sounds kind of greedy. This is a good problem to have. The Twins not necessarily knowing where to spend their money. Obviously, if it actually came down to it, no team is going to have problems adding $30 million. If Jeremy Zoll at any point in the season was told, hey, you can add $30 million to this roster, he would be over the moon. He would be the happiest man in America. So these are all great issues to have, but also ones I'm still just not entirely sold on the Twins having as much as Tom Pohlad would like us to believe.
Yeah, I mean, we'll believe it when we see it, but at least him talking about it makes me feel a little bit better, right? And like, it'll make me doubly pissed if the Twins roll into next year with a $105 million payroll. But like, it at least opens up the door that the Twins could spend this offseason. And I think that that's really exciting for us and for Twins fans and for this Twins team. And if you're adding another impact player, wherever it is, wherever you're spending that money, if you're adding another stud, kind of like they did in 2022 and 2023 with Carlos Correa, if you make a similar kind of big signing this offseason, it's going to get the fan base going. People are going to be stoked, and it could have huge effects on this team. And also, like, I guess circling back to the rotation talk, I think the one reason I wouldn't be upset about adding a big starting pitcher is that Pablo and Joe Ryan are both going to be leaving in the offseason, right? Like after 2027, they're both free agents. They're both going to get and reject qualifying offers. You're going to need someone to front that rotation alongside Taj Bradley. And so bringing in a starter would give you a year of all four of those guys together and then give you at least a decent foundation once Ryan and Lopez leave. But also, if you bring in a starter next year, that gives you 4 locked in spots in the rotation, plus, whoever remains of Dean Kramer and Bailey Ober to be your 5. And then you have all of Festa, Prelip, Rojas, Zebi, like all of those guys could either stay stretched out and be 6th, 7th starters in the minors, or move to the bullpen and just do the Andrew Morris thing and be great in short relief. And it gives you more options out there. And so, yeah, maybe adding a starter would be the way to go. Obviously, it's far off. We're not going to know for several months, and there's a lot of baseball to be played before then, but definitely intriguing.
Hey, if you want to talk about a big frontline starter acquisition, shout out Dean Kramer. I have to assume he's done for the night. 7 innings of 1-run ball against what is a pretty decent Orioles offense. Just absolutely massive for the team, the way they've been scuffling right now.
Yeah, well, and also, like, it just gives this bullpen a break, right? Like, maybe you can go to Hoffman and Gomez. I think Morris is thrown back to back, and Minter's thrown 3 in a row, so those two are probably down. But like, I mean, you have less guys in that bullpen for the rest of the game, but you don't need as many innings covered.
Oh my God, Austin Martin just put down a successful bunt, and he got on base. This is like the real breaking news covered on the Matt and Eric Talk Twins podcast.
Tony Oliva took him aside in batting practice today.
I still think.
My God.
No, okay, never mind. I'm taking that back because he's 88. I was gonna say I think Tony Oliva could go up there and drop down a bunt as good as Austin Martin, but no, that's a little too ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it helps when they just throw the ball into right field.
That it does. As great as this offense has been, this Orioles defense not that spectacular. And weirdly, I know that Aaron Gleeman has been talking about that a lot this year. The Twins have been very weirdly lucky with the defense they're facing. They haven't faced like terrible defenses. I mean, there's not really any defense in this league that sticks out as atrocious this year. You could argue the Twins is one of them if there is, but time and time again, this Twins team just seems to catch a lot of breaks this season on some just absolutely boneheaded defense by the other team.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about their run scoring being directly tied to just being like fluky good with runners in scoring position. It also is tied to just some horrible defense against them. Like they're getting extra outs, they're getting runs coming in when they're not supposed to. They're extending innings and able to add on because routine outs aren't made in the field. And so like that's another piece of why this offense has been unexpectedly good and better than we can probably expect the rest of the season.
And now I will say there's still a little bit of credit due to this team because in order to get a lot of fluky plays to go your way and cash in on a lot of bad defense, you do have to have been putting the ball in play in the first place. But yeah, I think that's why I'm really excited for these potential September call ups of Walker Jenkins and Erod because as Matt laid out, this offensive production isn't necessarily sustainable in a playoff format.
Yeah, I also think like some of the areas where the Twins have been worse or like really bad offensively, it's right field. I mean, Keishel's been really hot for a couple months, but like he can kind of move around. And we've talked about how the Roden and Martin platoon hasn't been particularly effective. Also, like left field has been really good offensively, at least against right-handed pitching, because we've had Trevor Larnach out there. But like Larnach can always move into a DH role, get another lefty bat out in left field who's a better defender, and like Jenkins or Erod, that could help in a couple of different ways. I just think that the Twins have a lot of position player talent, banging on the door that are probably going to be up in the next couple of weeks following Culpepper, and that's super exciting for a team that now looks competent in the bullpen and has at least some guys, at least has a major league rotation. I think that there's more of a path to success than that definitely pre-deadline.
Man, this really is just about believing, right? Like, I know it's the word that Tom Pollad's been throwing in our faces, which feels really kind of undeserved as fans. But I just sit here thinking about this next month or two to come, all of this talk we've just had about the way the Twins added at the deadline, guys coming up. It it's been too long since we've been able to believe like this. And don't get me wrong, I don't believe this Twins team is competing for the World Series this year. Nobody really believes that. I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs. But I think you forget how quickly it becomes dispiriting to see a team not be successful, especially in a game like baseball where you have to watch this crap for 162 games when the Twins end up going the route they did last season, but B, when there is, I would say, kind of that element of magic and not quite luck to it, but I would say baseball, more than a lot of other sports, is really a sport of teams getting hot at just the right time to have some magical October runs. And this Twins team is starting to feel like they've put all the storyline pieces together to be that type of team.
Yeah, I mean, really, the playoffs is a crapshoot. Like, there's a lot of talent element for sure, but like we see, not the best team in the league win it all a lot. Like, it really is just the team that gets hot at the right time, and yeah, maybe that happens to the Twins. All that you can hope for is that they make the playoffs, and then we can see what happens from there. And also, I mean, we were ecstatic in 2023 that they just won a series. Like, that was a huge win. If the Twins have any success in October, like, that is going to be huge for this fan base. Like, they don't even have to be particularly successful. I'm not saying that they need to even make the World Series, but if they just make it to the championship series, we're going to be over the moon.
If this team makes it to the championship series, we will be witnessing something that we haven't seen since before me and Matt were born. Like, to me, that's almost incomprehensible for a Twins team to do.
I also just want to call out the Twins are eating through this Orioles bullpen. They haven't thrown their high leverage guys because like they're down and they've been kind of behind for most of the game. But like game one of a series and they're on, I think, their fourth reliever of the game already, and it's the seventh inning. That's pretty cool.
And it's the same thing we saw in the Brewers series, which is why the Twins were able to hold that to such a competitive nature as well. You look at game 3, the Twins end up dropping it, but as I mentioned, they loaded the bases in the 7th, again in the 8th. I don't really remember who was pitching in the 7th, but in the 8th, they had Abner Uribe throw like 35 pitches, even after he had already walked 2 guys in that inning, because they really did just have nowhere else to go. And as much as I was just lamenting the Twins not being able to cash in on that, once again, in a season of ups and downs and regressing to the mean, if the Twins just continue plugging away with this style of offense, they're going to continue to get rewarded again at some point.
Also, and it only matters if we get there, but like in that Brewers series, right? Like the last game, we absolutely ate through their bullpen, forced high pitch counts from all their leverage guys, saw all the leverage guys for a second day in a row. Like the Twins aren't necessarily the team that's going to benefit from that because today the Brewers are playing a different team and the Twins don't get to reap the rewards of forcing high pitch counts for all those guys. But like if you get to a playoff series where you're playing 5 or 7 games, now when you start to really force those 20, 30 pitch innings for their high leverage relievers, it adds up. And by game 6, game 7, you've seen a ton of pitches from their relievers, and they're maybe not as fresh as they were game 1, game 2. And, it's just speculation, and like they obviously have to make it there, but it does feel like this style of offense could be really interesting come October.
Absolutely. Weirdly, I would say this is one of those offenses that borders on not having a very large and blatant weak spot, right? Like, obviously, we have Ryan Kreidler playing tonight. He hasn't been particularly great offensively. We have Austin Martin in right, and me and Matt have been talking about that. But even then, you're a Byron Buxton healthy return and a prospect call up away from this being 1 to 9, a lineup of guys that you're not particularly comfortable against.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that that's the encouraging thing, like going into next year too. Like, yes, you're losing Bell and Jeffers, but they could very easily bring in a bat to replace Bell. We have a whole lot of prospect call ups on the way, and then long term, you expect Vaughn Lackey to be your catcher. That's probably a couple years out. I don't think he's going to be up until 2028. But like, there's a lot of talent on the position player side in the minors for the Twins, and it's hard to not be excited, especially, and I mean, we're looping it back to payroll again. But if the Twins are going to be willing to, oh my God, Josh Bell,
He just got a hold of that one.
7-1, no leverage guys are throwing tonight. It might be Dean Kramer for the 8th. He's only at like 85 pitches.
Yeah, at this point, because like when he ended the 7th, this was a 2-1 game. So I just kind of assumed that the Twins were going to want to throw the high leverage arms they have. But honestly, and again, this goes back to the team picking up the team. How amazing would it be to just get a Dean Kramer complete game here, right? If the Twins are up this big, why not ride Dean Kramer to 110, 115 pitches and give this bullpen a full day off?
Okay, the reason you're not going to ride Dean Kramer for 110, 115 pitches is that means that in the next couple weeks you're very likely to have to throw Kendry Rojas because Dean Kramer's now on the IL.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the type of Dean Kramer knowledge to know if he's a guy that can throw like that. I guess you do kind of take that for granted with some guys.
At this point, there's very few pitchers who can throw like that in the big leagues. Like, very rarely are you throwing guys 115 pitches, regardless of who they are.
115 might be a stretch, but I mean, Taj Bradley 100 piece is not like remotely uncommon at this point, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, that also just says something about where this Twins like rotation has been at several points. Rotation and bullpen. Oh my God, Travis Adams is already up and dancing.
Hell yeah. That's got to be such a great life being a like fringe bullpen guy, because you're pretty much just there to be the vibes, right? That's like if we're gonna get an NBA equivalence here, it's like that 16th year journeyman who's entirely on the team for just like vibes and leadership. Maybe not so much leadership in Travis Adams' case, but like to be a bullpen like not late end, but like end of the bullpen low leverage reliever has got to be a really fun ride.
I mean, that's Taylor Rogers right now.
Yeah, that's true. Taylor Rogers is this team's DeAndre Jordan or Mike Conley.
It's also like what Drew Butera was forever, just like backup catchers, or like AJ Ellis, or like there's just a million. Jeff Mathis, like it's just good vibes backup catchers, same thing.
And I feel like it always works for catchers because for some freakish reason, the defense just doesn't drop off, right? Like Jeff Mathis, even Austin Hedges this season, terrible at the plate. You're not going to catch Austin Hedges batting anywhere after like the seventh inning, but he's still, I would bet if we looked at his baseball reference page, has at least 40, 50 starts under his belt because even if he's old and he's slowing down and the bat's not there anymore, the defense is just clicking for some reason still.
The thing is, the defense falls off a cliff in a hurry. Like the aging cliff for defense behind the plate is steep. Like we saw that with Martin Maldonado. Like he was a great defender, and then one season it's like, oh, and he has no value whatsoever now. And like we saw the same thing with Christian Vasquez too. Like he went from great defender, above average bat for a catcher to, oh, this guy's pretty bad on both sides of the ball in a hurry.
That's why, if you want to loop this back into our whole finance conversation, I think there's a better than zero chance that the Twins do go out and make a splash for a 1 to 2 year deal on a veteran catcher. Pretty similar to what we did for Christian Vasquez, really, because if they do lose Ryan Jeffers to free agency, we'll see if they keep Alex Jackson all season. I don't think we really addressed that. That one still confuses me. But I think even if they do, there's a world where they bring in another like 10, $12 million a year catcher for 1 or 2 years and get great value out of that.
Yeah, the thing is, there's just very rarely like catcher free agents available like that. Like I'll look up the list right now, but I doubt that there's a real starting option that would be available in that range. And like what the that's pretty much what the Twins did with Caratini this year, right? Like
Yeah, but like if we could go out there and clone and then sign Victor Caratini again, I would be very happy with that.
sign who?
Victor Caratini, like obviously,
What
like I
was the
said,
first one?
I don't think I threw out a first one. I
Oh,
said clone
and
and
sign.
sign. Yeah,
Okay.
Victor Caratini.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I just don't love the idea of giving a multi-year deal to a guy that's not your bona fide starter behind the plate.
Well, since we're talking about it, like, what are the Twins doing with not Alan Jackson? Shout out my country fans out there. That's a new one. I've had a lot of Austin Jackson this year. That's a new one. But
The country singer.
what are the Twins doing with Alex Jackson? Not even in a. I don't think he deserves his roster spot, but I don't remember the last time I've seen him playing because he's rightfully cemented behind Ryan Jeffers and Victor Caratini. So now you're just in a really tough spot with him.
Yeah, I don't think he's long for this roster. I think they kept him around in case they moved Jeffers or Caratini at the deadline. And now, like, they're keeping him here because they don't have a clear option to replace him on the roster. And they just want to have, like, that extra level of insurance in case one of the catchers does go down. But I mean, I would be surprised if he makes it more than a week or two still on this roster before getting replaced. Also, to circle back, the other catchers that are available this offseason, it's like Carson Kelly, who's having a good year with the Cubs. He has a decent bat, good defender. He'd probably be available on a 1 or 2 year deal. Same with Tyler Stevenson. He might be like the closest thing to a starter outside of Ryan Jeffers available. Jonah Heim's having a bounce back year. If you just want a bat that can kind of catch, Gary Sanchez is around. Like there's some okay options.
I do not need a Gary Sanchez reunion. I'm sorry, Gary. It was fun while it lasted. You were a little bit scary, but unfortunately, it was more scary to us as Twins fans than it was to the general opposition.
Yeah. Also, just adding on for like other options. Again, it's not a very good free agent class, like at all. I mean, we talked about how the Twins probably aren't going to be bringing in an outfielder just because of all their young guys. Even if you're just looking at the infield, like the third base options are uninspiring. First base, not much better. Like maybe they take a flyer on Andrew Vaughn, but
Hit me with what you think is probably the top three batters to reach free agency this season. Not
the
Ryan
top three.
Jeffers.
the top three for the Twins outside of Jeffers that I would be interested in are like Jazz Chisholm, Brandon Lau, Glaber Torres, and maybe Luis Ariz, like all second basemen. And I think that that would be a great fit. It allows you to move Cody Clemens to plug holes wherever. Maybe Cody Clemens is your everyday first baseman. I think that that's the ideal fit. Maybe then you move Royce Lewis to play like first and DH, kind of be in the Josh Bell role. I think that'd be cool.
I would be really happy with the Brandon Lau addition. I know that was something that we were really begging the Twins to consider as a trade this offseason. I, as much as I've loved seeing the Luis Ariz revival, I just really struggled to buy it, you know?
The good news is that Luis Ariz is almost certainly going to get a 1 year deal. Like he's not going to be expensive.
Oh, for sure. He'd very much be within the Twins, both I'd say price range and general roster building plans. And don't get me wrong, if they bring him back, I'm really excited. Loved Luis Ariz the first time. I think you kind of had to if you were a Twins fan. Would be really fun to see him come back, but I do think the Twins could do better if they're going to be spending real money this offseason.
Yeah, but I still think like Ariz is getting like 1 year, 10 or 15 million. But if we're talking about like a stud, I mean, Jazz is the only one that like really fits this team in any capacity offensively, and I think he's a fun player and super talented and adds a whole new dimension to this team, and he's versatile, which is Twins like. Uh, he like he's just gonna have some interesting personality stuff, which like is fine. Like I don't mind a star that's kind of over the top. But I just think that would be an interesting fit for a really young team and a team that rosters Royce Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look at some of the guys the Twins are going to be rostering next year, I think you could say this entire thing's a little questionable. But if it's working for this season, I guess you roll it over. That's my biggest takeaway. This being the first year that we've done the podcast, been active in the preseason, in the off season, during the season, all the above. I would like to say that we know it all and we could do Jeremy Zoll's job. I don't think I could. I've had some great takes. I've had some very questionable takes, and I'm ultimately glad that I'm behind this microphone and not at a Twins press conference.
So looking at starting pitchers who are available, like I think Freddie Peralta stands out as an option. He's probably going to take like okay, maybe he takes a cheaper multi-year deal than we expected going into the year, but I think he's a prime candidate to sign for like 1 year, 20, 25 million, get like a big pillow contract, go to a team that has good pitching development and see if he can turn it around. And the Twins were already interested in him last year. He's a really talented player. He would fit in their payroll and roster construction, like how they generally like to build teams. And I think giving him a big 1 year deal makes sense. Otherwise, like Michael King will probably opt out and he'd be expensive, but I've always loved Michael King. If you want to buy the injury dip on Shane Bieber, he's going to be available. Brandon Woodruff probably won't pitch next year, but you could give him a multi-year deal and hope that he gets healthy at some point. And then it really drops off. Like you've Shota Imanaga, Robbie Ray, yeah, and then it gets rough after that. Trevor Rogers, who we just saw the Twins face tonight.
Yeah, you're not
Casey
lying.
Mize.
That does get ugly really quick. I'm thinking about Freddie Peralta, and I don't know if he really deserves this after the season he's been having. And I also don't know if I've really seen a pitcher end up on a deal like this, but he also kind of seems like the prime candidate for a Bo Bichette type of deal, where it'd be like, I don't know, maybe let's say 3 for 60 with opt outs after every season. And I think that's also something that, I mean, the Twins have already shown a tremendous amount of interest in. They structured one of Correa's deals like that very similarly, and one that I think could be mutually beneficial for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some pitcher deals like that. Like, what comes to mind for me is the Nick Pivetta deal with the Padres, where essentially is like a 4 year deal, but if he has an arm injury, it voids the last 2 years. But then the Padres can add a club option for a year, even after that voids. Like, that's kind of similar. But yeah, I mean, I could see the Twins getting creative with Peralta. Overall, like, okay, again, it's August. We're not even into the off season. It's really hard to say what the Twins will or should do, but the fact that we're even talking about this and speculating is exciting. And the fact that we're speculating and we still have 2 months of hopefully competitive baseball ahead of us is a huge upward sign for the Twins.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned this before, but when we started this podcast, we were in the off season, and honestly, my biggest worry at that time was looking ahead at this season, and I was just so certain that like come August, we were going to be sellers at the trade deadline. It was going to be a repeat of 2025, and I'm like, how do you make content around a team that bad? You know, like I was already thinking about how dry these podcasts were going to be, how dim the vibe was going to be, how little we'd have to talk about. And here we are pushing an hour and 40 minutes on this podcast. And I think that speaks volumes to where this Twins team is at right now more than anything else. So I said it, I think I said it the last time we recorded. It's been a minute now, but like, don't forget to enjoy this season. You know, even if we're hanging around 500, don't ever forget to enjoy a season of baseball where the Twins are fighting for the playoffs.
Yeah, like even in recent seasons when the Twins have been like thought to be competitive, they've had some really rough August and Septembers. Like even going back to like 2024 and the collapse last year when they sold off. Yeah, even like 2022 where they weren't very good down the stretch. Like they've had some really frustrating teams where like we thought they were going to be good and then they just weren't. And so it's kind of refreshing and fun to have a team that had no expectations be competitive. And I think that that's fun in a different way.
When would you even say is the last time the Twins have really added like this at a deadline? I think it was 22 when we brought in Tyler Molly and I. It's
Jorge
not Felix
Lopez.
Bautista. Who was that?
Jorge Lopez.
Yeah, Jorge Lopez. I was gonna say the other reliever out of Baltimore. To me, that's and even that I don't think that compares to the additions that the Twins made this season.
I think, I mean, the Malley trade was bigger than any deal that the Twins made this year. And Jorge Lopez was probably on like not quite the Jeff Hoffman level because he didn't have the track record of Hoffman, but like for that year was as dominant or in the middle of as dominant of a season as Hoffman. And he was under cheap control for like 4 more seasons after that. So, I mean, that was a pretty big deadline too, but that's definitely the last time the Twins bought aggressively. And I don't even know before that. Like, I can't even think of a deadline where the Twins were really active.
Luke Keeschel almost just killed me with laughter. I can't even begin to describe the play I just witnessed.
He does
Absolute take
not look
by
like an
Leone
outfielder.
Taveras out to right field. And credit Luke Keeschel for making an attempt, but he was still about 10 feet from the warning track and 20 feet away from a baseball that went off the wall.
Yeah, I saw that. He's just not a great outfielder. He's just not good anywhere on the field you put him. Like
Okay, to his credit though, that ball did go off the top of the padding. Like that's just going to be a really difficult play to make no matter who's out there.
Okay, but just from the angle he was running at it, I could tell he took a bad route because he was running parallel with the warning track.
Yeah, that's not really what you ever want to see out of one of your outfielders. But again, he'll learn. Hopefully, I would think at the very least he just showed the athleticism to potentially one day be a good outfielder.
Yeah, he's probably like a similar situation to Austin Martin, where if you give him a year or two, he has the athleticism that he develops into a good corner outfielder. But like right now, it's pretty rough watching him. He's just hitting so well that you can't take him out of the lineup. Oh my God, Kobe Mayo killed the ball.
And you're about to watch Austin Martin make an even more questionable play than I'd say Luke Keeschel did.
It was just a misplayed carom.
All right, at this point, we're an hour 40 in. For the sake of our listeners, I don't really think they need us to do play-by-play for a game that will be at least today old by the time they get this. Matt, anything else you want to spit this week?
I don't think so. I mean, I feel like there's at least one topic where like, yeah, we'll talk about that and then just never got around to it. But I'm sure we'll remember later and we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah, that does always seem to be the case, and maybe we could be a little bit better about this too. But that is always why we have Twitter as well. So if you liked what you heard from us this week, you will be able to find us on Twitter at the Matt and Eric Talk Twins podcast. We're also individually active on Twitter every now and then, if we're being honest, but hopefully more and more as the Twins become more and more competitive over the last end of the season. Otherwise, you can catch Matt writing for Twins Daily now. He's been putting out some pretty consistent articles, and it's been a lot of fun reads. A lot more of a, I would say, statistically inclined read, which is certainly, I would say, Matt's specialty. Outside of that, you'll continue to find us hopefully every week now again. Now that we're all settled, we'll hopefully all be healthy. Hopefully, we don't have any sort of gaps like this moving forward again for a while. And if we do, you'll be able to catch us on Spotify, on YouTube, on Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Till then, thank you for listening.